When you donate or support an organization, what do you want out of it? Do you want to feel like you're part of a community, or do you want to be asked for donations time and time again? I have to admit, I have a bone to pick with some nonprofit organizations. The emails and the communications I get from them, they're always asking for donations, and I'm kind of getting sick and tired of it. So I decided to do an episode on it, but I didn't want to just talk just with me talking. I invited Natalie Gilson, who is an ocean storyteller here in Canada, actually here in Ontario. We connected about a month and a half ago, and she's here to talk with me about communications and how nonprofit organizations can do better to communicate with their audience. We're going to talk about that on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin, and this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. And something I always talk about when we take action is teaming up or supporting a nonprofit organization. And there are a lot of nonprofit organizations out there, some big, some small, some medium sized, and many of them do some really great things. Some of them you don't even realize how much they do because all they do is communicate what they need from you. And a lot of that time is support in terms of cha-ching, money. And that's not always a good time, especially in a time where, we're in a recession or potential recession, when inflation is out of, it's really, really high. And, sometimes people are just wondering, including myself, like, let's just worry about, the cost of food going up and, mortgage rates and rent and all this kind of stuff. We need to worry about that more than we need to worry about donating to an organization. I want to feel like if I'm supporting an organization or I'm talking about it, I want to be loyal to that organization. I want to feel like I'm a part of it. I want to feel like I'm part of it, the community. I want to feel like I'm helping out in some kind of way because that's how I want to take action. But a lot of times that communication doesn't really come through like you're a part of that team. It's just more of, hey, what can you give us? Here's what you can give us and we can do this type of work. But you're not really going to be involved other than that. And so I wanted to invite Natalie Gilson on, who, is becoming a really good friend of mine. She's a colleague. We've talked for about a month and a half. We met over LinkedIn, and she is the Vice President of Science Communication for Pisces Research Project Management Incorporated. This is a very unique organization that works with nonprofit organizations, academics, research groups, and so forth, to help them manage a lot of the administrative side and communication side of putting a project together. It is so helpful. I can't tell you enough how helpful it is because I've worked on the other side, whether it's part of government, academics, where there's so much administration that it takes away from you actually doing the project. And that's, as scientists, we don't want to be taken away from doing the project. So we need the help. And this is a sort of like a unique offering that Pisces Research Project Management provides. It's a great organization. I'll put a link to the website in the show notes so that you can listen or you can see what they're up to and what they do. But that, Natalie is here to help me through this, trying to find solutions of how nonprofits can better communicate with their community, right? With the people that are getting emails, with the people that are on their social media, with the people who they engage with in the public, in person or not in person, virtually. Just making it a little bit more as part of a community. And that's what we kind of came to as from a solution point of this. But I want you to listen to the details. It's a great conversation of sort of like the problem, some of the solutions that have been proposed or have been, implemented by certain organizations or companies teaming up with organizations, as well as some of the problems with that for other organizations, and what we can do to really make sure that people are part of a community. So that's what this episode's all about. I want you to enjoy this episode with Natalie Gilson, this interview. Enjoy the interview, and I will talk to you after. Hey, Natalie, welcome to the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Are you ready to talk about one of my favorite topics, communications for the oceans?
Yes, absolutely. I'm super excited to be here. I love talking about ocean communications and storytelling. So 100% ready.
That's awesome. We met probably about a month and a half ago. I think we discovered each other on LinkedIn, and actually it was funny. We had a mutual friend, Amanda, who I remember she contacted me. She's like, "I have someone for you to meet. This is amazing." And I ended up like contacting you separately, and we got on a couple of calls and had some great calls. And at one point we were like, this would be a great podcast. We're talking about this stuff, and we just said, you know what, let's do it. So I'm super excited to do this. I appreciate you doing the recording over like the holiday season. I know things are busy, but I do appreciate it. But today we're going to be talking about what I said at the beginning: communications for the oceans, particularly how nonprofit organizations contact people to get support for the organizations. Not only support from a call to action, like, hey, the government is doing this and we need to act, but also from a donation perspective. And I think based on our conversation last time, for me anyway, personally, I was like, feels like they're always asking for money and I don't know exactly what I'm getting for my money. So we're going to talk sort of like how that communication could be better in the future. And since it's the beginning of 2024, what better way to kick off this interview? But before we get into all of that wonderful stuff, Natalie, why don't you just let the audience know who you are and what you do?
Sure. Yeah, definitely. So I am an ocean storyteller, science communicator over this last year. But I come from a very creative background. So I owned my own creative studio for 8 years, starting in, I think it must have been 2015. I started that company. I was doing a lot of freelance graphic design, freelance creative work, grew my company, brought on some team members, and continued to grow over the following 7 years. I just kind of did a little bit of absolutely everything you can imagine in terms of communications and marketing and brand strategy, brand consulting, and design, lots of creative direction as well. And for me, I've always really identified with the ocean. I've always loved the ocean. It comes to me from, like many of us, a childhood memories of the ocean and childhood passion for the ocean. So I used to spend summers. I grew up in Alberta and spent my summers on the west coast of Canada with my dad, who's a kayak guide. And just some of my earliest memory is being in a canoe with my mom out on the coast and watching harbor seals, pop up and take a look at us, right? So the ocean's always been really important to me. And late in 2022, I was really feeling this like tension with my business, my creative business. Something wasn't connecting, right? I was doing a lot of creative work for purposes that didn't really sit well with me. And I was ready for a change, right? I wanted to incorporate this ocean identity and this ocean passion of mine into my business. So I kind of dropped everything. It was sort of a very risky decision. I just sort of let go of everything I was doing, was like, that's it. I'm going fully ocean focused. I was looking into the ocean industry in Canada and elsewhere, and there are not a lot of creative communicators supporting oceans. Specifically, there are people out there, some incredible people doing some great things, but overall, for the size of the industry, and especially in Canada with ocean industry growing, right, ocean industry growth, right, to not have the communicators and creatives supporting the industry was kind of mind-blowing to me. So I sort of was like, either I'm not researching correctly or there really is a gap here that I need to fill. So I took that leap and kind of set aside all my other clients and work and decided to go fully ocean focused. So that was at the beginning of 2023. I knew nothing about oceans, knew nobody in the industry, just came with a whole lot of creative and strategic experience, and kind of went on this journey, meeting all kinds of different people, and had a few amazing opportunities come up. One of which was joining with the company that I work for now, which is Pisces Research Project Management, so based out of Halifax. And I was asked to join Pisces to set up a science communications department. Up until that point, I had never actually thought of myself as a science communicator, but it was nice to see the work that I do through this different sort of lens. So since then, I've been working with Pisces and just growing my knowledge of ocean industries and where communications are most needed and where they're valuable, and trying also to increase the positive reputation of ocean storytelling and ocean communication, right? Because I've encountered a lot that sort of there's a feeling that communications and creative stuff is often the fluffy kind of stuff that comes at the end, whereas in reality, it has so much power and so much value, and there are so many amazing organizations doing amazing work that are just not doing a good job of telling that story. And it's only to their detriment. And so I'm sort of on this life mission now to take everything that I know how to do creatively and empower all these organizations and businesses in oceans with the power of storytelling, right?
I love it. I love it. I mean, we kind of come down a similar path where for me, it was a while ago where I was, meeting people at conferences and through sort of different channels like Twitter and stuff like that, where I was like, wow, when I sat down with them and chatted with them, like, oh yeah, I'm working on this project, I'm working on this. And, we think of it, as when you're coming from the science field, we think of it, oh yeah, that's cool. Like that's really like a fun project to work on, or that's really necessary. But then you start looking at what's being published on a mainstream sort of level, and it's like shark attack or dolphins stranded, or it's like negative stuff around the ocean, the perception's off. But then all these cool projects are happening that could really bring up the optimism around the ocean, but also like really talk about the people who have such a great passion there. And that's how this podcast really started. Was I wanted to make sure that people knew about these projects and heard it right from, the mouths of the people who are working on it, and seeing the challenges that they face and seeing the successes that they have when they do have success. And that's been like my goal, for this podcast all the way through. And I feel like we've achieved that in a lot of ways. And also, trying to demystify a lot of the common misconceptions of what people think about the ocean and certain ocean species and so forth. So, we definitely come down the same path. You just did it a lot faster. You just did it. But I mean, that's a huge risk, like to take, to say, okay, here are the clients, that I've had that I could probably continue to get work from for a good amount of time. I've built a good relationship with, and all of a sudden you're like, you know what? Like, it's been great to be able to work with you, and we'll probably work maybe a little bit here and there, but I really want to go down this path, not knowing many people in the business. What was your, a lot of people do this, like when they first graduate, they're trying to find jobs. I was like, what was your sort of process to kind of dive into this industry, and how did you contact people? Was it through like things like LinkedIn and online?
Yeah, it was almost 100% driven by LinkedIn, which, this would be a great endorsement for LinkedIn, but like the most valuable career building platform. I've never used LinkedIn really before this year. And then I just decided I was going to do it. And I'm naturally quite an introverted person. So the idea of reaching out to people and kind of putting myself out there made me really uncomfortable. But I set a goal that was like, I'm just going to contact 5 people a day, assuming, 2 out of 5, 3 out of 5 won't get back to me. We'll just see what I can do. And it, for me, it was very organic in the sense of like, I never asked anything of anybody other than like, hey, we have a shared ocean passion. We should sit down and have a coffee chat and talk about the ocean. And, that I think really helped sort of set the comfort level for people, because it wasn't like I was saying, hey, I need a job. I just want to share ocean stories because we all have an ocean story. Let's just share them.
And that's how it kind of worked with us. I had the same kind of process. I just reach out and like, you do some cool stuff. I want to talk to you about the cool stuff that you do. And I think that's really important to realize, is just don't go in right away. It's like, I want this, give me this. It's, hey, let's chat. Like, you do some pretty cool things and build those relationships. But yeah, I use LinkedIn all the time for that kind of stuff. In fact, that's how we met. So it's just, but I mean, it's really interesting to come across, obviously like a place like Pisces is not your typical, ocean sort of company, around the ocean. Because when a lot of people think about what you do in the oceans, which I always find it really interesting, because it's definitely needed. The services are needed there within the industry, but it's not your typical, when people think, they think of nonprofit organizations, they think of academics and government, right? And those are, and maybe like environmental consulting, where you're working with industry to kind of follow regulations. But not a lot of people think about sort of like what Pisces brings to the table in terms of offering that support, that extra support, whether it be from communications or project management, because there aren't a lot of resources within even government and even within academia. Like, sometimes they need that extra, planning, that extra, person or team to help them through a process, a workshop, or things like that. So did you right away see that within Pisces and be like, this is something that's like, that has a unique offering, and if I can bring together sort of like this science communication aspect we can really do some great things with a number of different organizations.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's all to the credit of Cass Morton, who owns Pisces, and everything
Right.
that she's built there. Like, she saw a need in oceans for the sort of project management and administrative support
Hmm.
when she started the company, and it's been growing since then, right? So she's the one who approached me with the idea of building a science communications department, because in her interactions with clients, there were more and more communications needs being expressed, and she recognized it as a skill
Yeah.
and expertise level. Um, but you're fully right. Like, it is interesting what Pisces does, because it is support services for what you traditionally think of as ocean industry businesses or organizations, right? So yeah, government research projects and all that kind of stuff. But we're built on this whole idea that you're in oceans because you want to do ocean stuff, right? You don't
Yeah.
want to spend your day managing budgets and writing on social media. Like, that's not really the reason ocean researchers
Right.
and ocean organizations exist. They're the necessary evils
Hmm.
of the job,
Hmm.
right? And yet everybody at Pisces, like, we absolutely love all the little things that we do, like a huge nerd over
Yeah.
communications, and we do data management and just all the things you don't want to do,
Yeah.
but
That take up time.
yeah, exactly.
It takes up a lot of time doing those things, and it takes away from a lot of, chief scientists who have to do that administrative work, and it can help them a lot, Yeah, I like that idea. That's awesome. Now, in terms of the communications aspect, this is what we really wanted to kind of get into, and we'll probably do another episode on Pisces in itself. Maybe we'll have Cass on and talk to her about it as well. But let's talk about communication and for the oceans, and something that I've always had that I mentioned earlier, not a beef with, but it's always like a concern of mine, is every time I receive an email from a nonprofit organization, whether it's in Canada or whether it's in the US or whether it's from elsewhere. I subscribe a lot to these because I always try and get news and see what all these organizations are up to. A lot of it's just like, hey, here's the problem. If you donate this amount, we can get this. Or, a supporter came out and said, well, they'll match, 50-50 what we support. So let's raise $1,000 or let's do this. It always seems like they're asking for something. And I totally get that it matters to them because it allows them to do their work. But it always seems like they're asking for something. And it's almost like I'm not getting the value that I want, or I'm always just being like, if you don't do this, we just can't do the work. And it's kind of like a bit of a guilty feeling, I guess, in a way. Do you see a lot of this too?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think we were chatting about this just before we went on record, about how New Year's Eve at 11
Yeah.
on New Year's Eve, I've got 10 emails from amazing organizations.
Hmm.
Donate now and triple your impact before the end of the new year. And it just
Yeah.
becomes like everything, we're bombarded with messages. And even though the intention behind the messages of these nonprofits is so good and it's so important, it's just becomes overwhelming, right? And there's that, it's the same message delivered over and over again with a different face on it. And I think that
Hmm.
that's where it starts to become a challenge, is that when you see the same thing over and over again, you tend to not take action because it just
Yeah.
becomes that background noise. And so there's something in there about, the need to stand out, the need to appeal to people and inspire people on a level other than guilt and give us your
Hmm.
money.
Yeah. I find that, one thing that I find is I will read just the subject line and I'm like, I know exactly what this is about.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like if it's an accomplishment. Hey, we were able to do this. Thank you. Be like, oh, what were you able to do? Okay, I'll look into the email. Be like, oh, that's pretty cool. Because a lot of these organizations get a lot of stuff done that is truly amazing. You start to think back, like, how did they get this done, and how many things did they been able to get done? And I usually get that when I do an interview, because I'll ask them specifically about those things. And in my research, I find out about this, but you don't necessarily see it from an email. You're always, it's like they're always struggling. I get fundraising is a tough thing to do. But from me, like I work in customer success in my day job. So I'm calling people, I'm dealing with people all the time. And we work on the financial level. So it's a lot of like accountants and things like that. And so if I'm always, asking, oh, we have this product or we have this product. Have you thought about this? Because we're in software. I'm like, oh, what about this edition? This, and after a while, they're going to be like, every time I hear from you, you're trying to sell me something.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't want to hear that. I don't want to be sold on something, because I'm not going to want to pick up the phone, or I'm not going to want to answer your email. What value do you bring me, as the customer? Like, what value do you bring? And I feel like that's the same thing. I ask myself the same thing with each of those emails. It's like, what value do they bring to us? It shouldn't always be about, or the perception shouldn't always be about money or trying to get money from people. It should be about what have you accomplished? What have you done? Or what do I need to know about that you need my help on, or you need, like, I know some organizations, like you talk about ocean storytelling. There's one organization, I remember I did an interview for it. I think it was called the River Project or something similar to that. And, they wanted to do, the government was thinking about putting in a sanctuary. It was the US. They were putting in a sanctuary, and they were, it was a huge deal. It was in a very hot fishing spot. So there was a lot of controversy around it. But this guy went out to his supporters that he built up over time, and he said, hey, tell me your story of what you like about this particular area. And this is in the Northeast. And people put in, he printed out, he said he had like a booklet, almost like a manual. He put in one of those massive binders. He had 2 or 3 of those massive binders of stories that were written out from people about what they liked. So he went down, moseyed on down to Washington, D.C., and he was like, he gave it to Republicans and Democrats alike. And, that's what he did. That's what the relationship he built up, and he just gave it to them so that they can bring back and do whatever. And, it went through. But he was like, that, I'm sure, had to do with it, where it's like, you start to see people talk about it. It makes almost a better impact. And like, now it's like, you're asking for my story and this is what you're going to do with it. I feel like I'm playing more of a role in this, even if I'm one of 4 million stories or whatever he had. You almost feel like that role. I feel like that is the kind of call to action that we should be asking, like nonprofits should be asking their email list from. Is that something that you find that would be better off? Like, where do we go from here? Like, what would you recommend to nonprofit organizations as a communications person?
Yeah, I think, you're really onto it with storytelling, because, stories are so powerful because they're one of the most ancient human activities, right? So I come from a background in archaeology and anthropology, so I can't help myself. But like,
of course,
you go back to the very beginnings of humanity, and we've got stories. You've got cave paintings in France, whatever you want to interpret them as. There's stories and creativity going back for forever. They're timeless, and it captures people. And when you ask somebody what their story is, they can't help but talk. You can't help but be like, oh, yeah, I get to share my story. But it also goes the other direction, right? In that, I think the impact of nonprofits and the work that they do and their visibility can greatly be improved by telling their story in a better and more impactful way that's not just tied to the donation piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I'm often advising businesses to tell their story in a way, and especially to tell their ocean story. So to tell that, because the ocean story is what inspires people, right?
Yeah.
Obviously, you have a business goal as well. So for the nonprofits, their business goal is fundraising, making the money they need to keep doing their thing. But so often that gets that swallows up everything else, right? That becomes the primary thing, and that storytelling piece is missing. And yet it's so impactful, right? And there's a lot of businesses, and there are organizations, nonprofits that do it well, that are doing it well as well. But it's just, it's building character and personality into your nonprofit to tell your story, to share your unique story, to gather the stories of other people, to add humanity to the organization or the business, right? Because that's where you start to connect with people. So I feel like you can do that in a number of different ways. I think with nonprofits, it's often a budget issue, or that not having the expertise on their teams to be able to communicate these stories well. But I think there's huge value in just stopping and thinking, even for a moment, like, what is my audience? What is the audience of my organization getting from this? what story am I telling them? What story can they tell me? How do I inspire them, and vice versa? Like, how do we create a
Yeah.
dialogue rather than a one-way ask all the time?
Yeah, I think that, like, when I look up, I don't know a lot about marketing. You have much more expertise in marketing than I do. I've done a lot of, research in terms of like watching videos of how other people talk about what they should be doing in their, not just their email list, but also like social media, presence. And a lot of people I see is just links being sent out and like, this is what we did, or this is what we're up to. This, but social media, even email, it is a dialogue. That's what you want to be able to create, is you want to be able to create that dialogue where people are responding to you. So you get their feedback. You're always getting their feedback. What would you recommend for nonprofits in terms of trying to get feedback from their listeners, or even like forming like almost like an advisory board of people, like their audience, whether it be email lists or social media, where it's like you can constantly ask them like, hey, what do you think of this piece that we're about to put out? Or what do you think of this, video that we're about to put out, or things like that, to get that constant feedback so that their message can be honed in a little bit better? Because I feel like sometimes they're missing the mark with me anyway. And obviously I'm just, a middle-aged white dude. So like, but there's a lot more in the audience, a diversified audience. So I would imagine they would get a lot of feedback from a variety of people.
Yeah, and honestly, like, it maybe seems overly simple, but just even having that awareness that you should ask that question and then asking that question, right? So maybe that is sending out an email that's like, hey, these are some of the things we did last year. Which of these things were meaningful to you? Like, just
Yeah.
directly asking your LinkedIn audience, or I know if you're on Facebook, you can see who your top followers, top fans are, right? So you could reach
Yeah.
out to those people and say, hey, like, what do you like? What do you dislike? Doing that kind of survey
Mm-hmm.
sort of thing, and it doesn't have to be complex. In fact,
Right.
the simpler the better.
Should be simpler. Yeah.
A question
Yeah.
that's like, what about us inspires you, or what interests you in us, and that just asking that question starts that dialogue. And that's what it's got to all be about, right? Because when you're trying to get something from somebody, or you're trying to create this environment of support for your
Mm-hmm.
organization, it can't be one way, because nobody's inspired by that. Nobody feels like they're part of something, right? You need to be able to listen as well as talk.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'm a big proponent of doing sort of like the opposite of what the industry does, in a way of just being like, let's try this. Let's, like, because businesses are doing it, and they're doing it for a reason. They're not just doing it because it's different. They're doing it because it's successful. If they're putting out videos or showing off some of their staff and that kind of thing. Oceana Canada has actually done some really cool things with their TikTok, where they have some of their scientists and campaign managers out on TikTok talking about stories about, what they need to look at. And I find it's just like a different perspective, because otherwise, you look at posts on Facebook, on LinkedIn, on Twitter, or X, whatever you want to call it, or Threads, and all these different platforms, it's all the same. It's like repurposed for each thing, when I feel it's like each social media site should have its own strategy. Same with email lists. It should have its own strategy. You have your campaigns that you're talking about, but I would love to see an email where it's like, hey, we were just talking to the ministry, and this is how the conversation went. We're so close, or we missed the mark, or, they missed the mark, and this is why it was frustrating. We need to put more pressure on them, and that kind of stuff. That's what I would love to see. But how do people, like nonprofits, stand out from the rest of the nonprofits? Because obviously there's competition for donations, but how do they stand out in that kind of way?
Yeah, and I mean, this is a question that's, on every business owner's mind, as well as every organization owner's mind. How do we stand out in the crowd of everything that's online? When everybody's doing the same things and on the same platforms. I truly believe that incorporating story into how you're communicating
Mm-hmm.
helps you stand out immensely, because, and this is something I see this all the time, and I tell people this all the time. So it's maybe good advice for the listeners here. But if
Yeah.
you can go to your website, and you can open up your website, and within the first like 5 seconds of scrolling, count how many times you've got the words "we" written in your content, right? Because that's you talking about you, which is what we naturally
Mm.
like to do. we all like to talk about ourselves. We like
Yeah.
to talk about our business. We like to talk about our organization, but just see how many times you've got that word written in there, right?
Yeah.
And then think if you're visiting a website and all they're doing is talking about themselves, right? Like we kind of shut off when people talk about themselves unless they're doing
Yeah.
it in a story kind of way or something that's really interesting to us, right? We just kind of shut down because you're like, okay, you're talking about you again. Like, great. Yes, you may be doing amazing work, but when you frame it from the like, we rescue whales and we do this, it's just, it's organization centric.
Hmm.
And to really stand out, you have to forge a connection with your reader, with your audience.
Yeah.
Doing that, or how to do that, you invite them into a story. And you can't invite someone into a story if all you do is talk about you, right?
Right.
Creating a story around your reader means you make them the hero of the story. So when I'm donating to an organization, I want to feel like I'm the hero, right? Or like
Yeah.
we talked about with the bracelet donation model, right? Where you buy a
Yep.
bracelet and you get to then wear it as a badge of honor. I'm not saying a nonprofit needs to do that, but you want to create that same feeling in people as they interact with you. It's like, okay, I'm involved in this story. It's not just them talking about what they do.
Hmm.
They're bringing me in, making me part of it, sharing how
Yeah.
I can be involved, how I can be the hero and wear that badge of honor. And
Hmm.
that's storytelling. It's making it audience centric, not organization centric. And it's often just a simple shift in language that can
Yeah.
really set a message apart from other ones, right? It's like if you got an email on New Year's Eve, you got one that said, donate now, it's your last
Yeah.
chance.
Yeah.
And then the
Yeah.
next one you got was like, you know, be the greatest ocean hero of 2023. You'd at least click on that, right? You'd at least want to know what that says, right?
Yeah.
So it's just that shift.
It's a completely different mindset,
Yeah.
right? When you get that subject line, it's like, even like with the new year coming up, everybody's like, oh, 10 news resolutions you can do quickly, or something like that for 2024. You see it in marketing, how to do social media marketing in 2024. It's like how to become the best ocean hero in 2024, like something like that, where you're just like, oh, okay, so how can I, be that ocean hero? Because that's what people are looking for, right? They're looking for a way that's tangible that they can do. That's why I think a lot of organizations, and even the industry, it really focuses on get the reusable water bottle and the reusable bags, even though to the collective it's easy to come in and scientists come in and say, well, that's actually not really helping. What's really going to help is government changing the policies and coming up with stuff like plastic regulations, and making sure we're managing fisheries properly and all these different things. But for people, it's really easy to kind of clench your teeth into and just be like, okay, this is what I would love to do. We mentioned the bracelets. Something, I did a podcast on this where I was like, I got this bracelet from my daughter for Christmas, and what I like about it is the messaging that's around it. This is your shark. Your shark is named Tank. Follow his journey, that you helped, produce. And then it goes into the organization that you're supporting that did the tagging of that shark. And I can pull up the app at any point in time and be like, follow. So like my daughter's like, hey, where's Tank today? And you're like, okay, let's go see if he's pinged and stuff like that. And you get to look at it. It's a really interesting sort of track that this shark is taking. And you're just like, I never thought that I would love a silky shark that much more. And every time I wear the bracelet, people are like, what's this bracelet about? Oh, it's a shark bracelet. It's this cool thing. And you tell the story. So it's almost like you talk about storytelling of like, the company or organization telling the story for you and including you in that story. But all of a sudden you're telling that same story. It's like, oh, I have a shark. Like this shark is in the ocean and it's not in an aquarium somewhere. It's in an ocean, and I'm helping it, for us to get more information on this shark.
Yeah.
And I think that's a pretty cool and almost viral way of storytelling to get other people to talk about the story. And I think that is the goal, right? For a lot of people, is to get that inspiration and to, get people to tell. So that's one way of getting people to, talk, and it can be so inspired that they talk about it. Are there other ways that organizations like can motivate their readers, their listeners, their audience to start telling other people, like, I got this really cool email, I want to talk. Because let's be honest, like, my daughters will come to me, and my other people will be like, I saw this video, I want to talk to you about, and it's usually something stupid, like a funny video kind of thing. But it's like, it's inspirational, because it's whatever it is people want to talk about. How can organizations really hit the right chords for people to be like, oh, I read something recently that I want to talk to my friends and family about?
Yeah. Yeah. It's a really interesting point because it works so well in the bracelet type model, right? Because,
Hmm.
companies who are doing that, they're tapping into a couple of basic human psychological desires. One is, which is empowerment. And like I
Yeah.
said, feeling like the hero. When you wear that bracelet and you get to show off that you've supported that shark, you get to tell people about where that shark is. It's because that company has invited you into that story. You've
Right.
been allowed to enter, the story that they tell and tell it in your own ways. They've empowered that story within you. And I think there's a lot to be learned from that model for
Hmm.
nonprofits because, at least in what I've seen lately, that's sort of buying something and having it create an impact, like planting trees or whatever that is.
Hmm.
That's pretty kept to the for-profit business world at this stage in time, right?
Right.
And I'm not suggesting that nonprofits need to go out and start selling bracelets.
Right.
Like, there's, for example, the Sea Turtle Conservancy out of Florida. I've always loved donating to them, and I've donated to them for years because every time I do, I adopt a sea turtle, and it's exactly the same idea. I don't have a bracelet, but I get a
Hmm.
certificate, and I get to
Yeah.
track that turtle as it travels around, right? And then there's just something about feeling connected to the organization through an action like that that's tangible that you can, like,
Hmm.
I can't hold a sea turtle in my hand, but you know what I'm saying. You
Yeah.
can say I did this,
Yeah.
right? Whereas donating $50, like, it doesn't feel personal.
Exactly.
So there's that. Yes, you're looking for donations, and yes, you can ask for donations, but how do you do it in a way that inspires people? So, back to your original question, I think you can do it in a number of different ways. You can do things that don't cost a lot of money. You can do these adoption certificates if you're working with animals. You can
Hmm.
equate donations to certain things. So, say you're a whale tagging organization, for
Right.
example, and if you donate $50, that buys one whale tag or whatever it is,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then following up on those donations, like having a good communications system for afterwards. That's like, hey, this is where your donation went. This is what it actually helped with. This is how you changed, what we do,
Yeah.
even if it's small, right?
Yeah.
Because that is that empowering piece. Um, and also that reward. We want as humans to be rewarded for the good things that we do, the good behaviors that
Of
we do,
course.
right? For that, and also, I think I heard you mention this on a different episode of your podcast, but inspiring people to take actions on their own, right? So the social
Mm.
marketing idea, right? And that could come in the form of, like, here's a toolkit of resources you could share on your own social media.
Yeah.
Here's an issue to in your local area, in the ocean, in your local area. If you go and do an Instagram reel, tag us in it and we'll share it for you. Like, again, creating that two-way dialogue, looking
Yeah.
to the community to spread your message. Because let's face it, a lot of nonprofits don't have the capacity to come up with these crazy, far-reaching communications campaigns,
For sure.
but you can definitely tap into your audience and just give them the resources they need to tell your story.
One thing I used to see quite a bit, I don't see it as much, but it was almost like the call to action to talk to your government representative, right? Whether you're in the US, whether you're in Canada, whether you're around the world, didn't matter. There were organizations who worked in this particular country, or they had an office in a particular country, and they were talking about, say, we'll just say Canada because we both live in Canada. But it was like, oh, the government's changing the Fisheries Act, which they did a while ago. And, we need to stop them to do that. So contact your local government official. And here are the different talking points that you can put in your message. You can just copy and paste it right in here, or here's an email that we came up based on these different talking points. You can just send them that email. It made it really easy for people to contact their government representative, whether it's local, provincial, state, or federal. I don't see that as much anymore. I mean, I see it on the change.org petitions,
Yeah.
but even then it's more of you just sign your name and, I guess you feel that you've participated in something, even though sometimes you don't know where that's gone. Other times it's worked out really well, especially if whoever's organizing it is like a larger nonprofit or somebody who's got a good reputation for taking it to government representatives. But I don't see that as much from an email perspective. Is there a reason for that? Or in your sort of experience, do people find they don't participate in that as much?
Yeah, I'm not 100% sure exactly what
Mm.
the reason behind that would be. I mean, if I had to make an educated sort of guess around that, I would say that it's probably in part noise again. So being asked
Yeah,
to do that so many times
maybe. Yeah.
for a while, and also the lack of outcome, right? I would imagine
Mm,
that if you're doing that constantly, yet nothing's changing, it's
true.
demoralizing, and people are less likely to continue to do it. So it does raise an interesting point, because how could we bring that back? How could an organization bring that back in a way that is impactful for people?
Yeah.
I think change.org, and also Only One, they do a lot of
Yeah.
ocean
For
ocean
campaigns
yeah,
and things.
sorry.
Yeah.
For words, ocean campaigns, and
Yeah.
they follow up with you on the outcome of that, right? And that's really nice, but not when it's a negative outcome, of course.
Of course. But see,
Yeah.
here's what I think they should be doing. This is my experience. What I've seen, what I would like to see is almost like a summary. So you almost take like the people who, like, say, if you're participating, please put your name down, and then we're going to contact you with what we've come up with in terms of a result. So if whether it's positive or negative, you can be like, hey, you know what? We really appreciate the work. We want to kind of follow up to show you what the work that you put in, whether it takes 10 minutes or it takes 5 minutes or takes 1 minute, the work that you put in, this is where we're at right now. And, whether say it's a negative income, this is where we need to go. And this is what we're going to be doing. We want to thank you. Just almost that acknowledgement of like, hey, you know what? It did, like, they were almost there. We just didn't put it across. And it's almost, I guess you're admitting a bit of failure there, but you're almost like, hey, you know what? Like, we're almost there. This is something that takes a long time, but we're getting to them. If we reach out again, would you be interested in participating? I almost feel like just that follow up and that acknowledgement to say, hey, you know what? Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to do this would help, and just give an update on whether it's an email or whether it's a video. I think video, even like a podcast, like an audio message, is more impactful, more personable. I mean, obviously you can't do it for everybody, but you could do a general message to a group that helped you and just say, hey, we want to thank you so much for doing this. We were able to accomplish it, or we weren't necessarily able to accomplish it, but this is the next steps that we're going to take to get it going. I feel like that would be a better, because it's never going to go. I mean, it's not always going to go in your direction, the way you want, but it's something that could help.
Yeah, that raises actually a really interesting point about, especially for nonprofits, annual reports and
Mm,
transparency in those things, right? Like, I think that the annual report from a business perspective or nonprofits often done to satisfy a funding requirement, right?
yeah.
But it's also this incredible opportunity to share with your community what's been done
Yeah.
that year, and like what you've achieved and what the individuals have achieved. Like, if you've ever gotten those emails from like the software programs you use, where at the end of the year they'll be like, you sent 10,000 messages this year,
Yeah.
and Grammarly does that. You kind of get this like,
Yep.
report of all the things you've done. It would be really neat to see annual reports kind of taken in that perspective. So yeah, you need the funding side of the annual report, but how could you
Hmm.
take it and also turn it into this incredible, inspiring communications tool that shows the efforts of your
Yeah.
community, how the donations have had an impact, and transparently, because I think that's also incredibly important. We don't stories are interesting, but stories aren't always good. You know,
Yeah, it's
like,
true.
not every
It's true.
story has a happy ending, and that's
Especially in
okay.
conservation.
Exactly. Yeah, but telling the truth, like building up that
Yeah.
trust by being
Hmm.
transparent about what went well and what didn't, and where you actually need support, and
Yep.
I think that will also help to create that buy-in to your story and your organization, and more loyal donate,
Absolutely.
more people who donate year after year, right? Like I go back to the
Yeah.
Sea Turtle Conservancy because I can track my turtles and I feel part of their story.
Yeah.
You're not looking for one $10 donation one time. You want to build that loyal
Yeah.
base of people who come back year after year. And so there are a lot of lessons to be learned there, I think, from the business world, right? And repeat customers too. And how do you make people feel like they're your brand advocates and they're part of your story, and there's nowhere else they'd rather be than donating to
Mm-hmm.
you.
100%. I almost think too, like, you talk about sort of the annual report. I mean, when they always put out their annual report, or I know it's on a website and stuff like that, I look at that. I'm like, okay, great. Like, nothing really excites me about it in terms of what they've accomplished. You're right. It's more to satisfy grants or foundations and things like that from the business side. But wouldn't it be cool if they did like what Spotify Rap does for music? Where it's like, and podcasting, it's like, oh, here's your, organizational wrap for the year. So, you donated to this campaign or you responded to this campaign. We want to give you an update of what it is. I think that, because I mean, there's a lot that happens in a year. I mean, you look at the Apple, I subscribe to Apple Music. They did a Wrapped as well. And it's like, oh, I listened to that in January. I forgot about that song, and then you start listening to it again. Well, it's the same thing with probably a campaign. It's like, oh, I forgot I actually responded yes or no, or like signed the petition or things like that. It's like, I don't even know what happened to that, because whether you saw the email that they sent out, it's like, hey, you responded or you donated on this email to this organization or to, for this campaign. And this is where we got with this campaign, and this is where we need to go. And these are our next steps. It just makes it so much easier. It makes you like follow the story. It's that there's short-term storytelling and there's long-term storytelling. And the long-term is where you're included, you're included in all of it, but you should be included in that long-term, being like, you helped us accomplish this, or you helped us get to a point where we didn't really, meet what were our expectations, but we're trying to get further. And these are our next steps. You could still be a part of this story.
Yeah, exactly. Imagine on New Year's Eve at 11:59, you get an email like that has the summary of an organization's year and all the things that their donors and followers and
Mm-hmm.
community helped them achieve. And that was it. And then the next day, on New Year's Day, you kind of got, this is what we did last year. This is what we want to do
Mm-hmm.
this year. Help us. Like,
Yeah.
would you be more likely to donate and be
Yeah.
involved the next day once you've seen that?
Absolutely. Absolutely. When I'm involved in a project, I'll put money into it. You know what I mean? Like when you're involved in a project at work, and they're like, oh yeah, hey, we're gonna do this. We're gonna do a lunch. Okay, let's do a lunch party. Let's all donate. Whatever the amount is. Like same thing with a nonprofit organization. Hey, you helped us create this report or this feedback report. Thank you so much. Like, we're gonna continue on. These are our next steps. Do you want to still be a part of it? And then that's when you get your feedback, and that's where you get to see people part of it. And I feel like that is the true aspect of a nonprofit, is if you can mobilize your audience, your supporters, whether they're financial supporters or not. Now you're starting to get these loyal fans. And let's be honest, in Canada, there aren't many foundations. You know what I mean? Like there aren't many nonprofit organizations dedicated to the ocean. You have a chance to really get some loyal people here, and just by incorporating them into that story and what they can do. So
That's what every business is trying to do, right? Because that's the best customers are your repeat customers in business, right?
yeah,
You need that loyal base that just keeps coming back and back for whatever it is you're offering. And there's no difference for the nonprofit world, right? Like you have your loyal fan base who just keeps coming back. That's the dream, because
yeah,
you don't need to put as much energy into the ask,
right,
because
right,
it just comes naturally, because
yeah,
you've put the time into building up that rapport, building up the brand, right? Like you get a lot of companies building really fun, creative brands that connect with people. We need the nonprofit world to build these kinds of brands where they share the stories of their team and they, invite you into that story, because just like it works in the for-profit world, when you can build up that brand and that loyalty, you kind of you build that fail safe, and you're not
yeah.
always chasing the next dollar. You're a little bit more, secure that you've got the audience and the participation you need to keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And I feel like we're in a time now where, we talked about the bracelets or some sort of, t-shirt or some sort of materialistic item, which is almost a business venture in itself to do, which, like you mentioned before, somewhat nonprofits are not in that state to be able to do that, because, we know nonprofits, they work their butts off for, like, when they're usually a really small team, and they do a great job at it, but they can't really take on a full on product line or product lines to be able to do that. And they can team up with certain ones like Fallow and stuff like that, but it's a lot to ask. But I feel like in today's day, the age of information, I feel like that's where we can really push the envelope with nonprofit organizations. Provide feedback in, on social media, in personalized videos, like to emails, be like, hey, segment your list to be like, you responded to this, so we want to kind of give you an update on where we're at in this. Not just wait to, like, hey, we put out our annual report and it's probably going to be boring for you, but you're in there, or your project's in there. Let's just go like to a personalized, you are the supporters who actually inspired us to go more on this project. You responded to this email, or you responded to the social media, like, here's an update, and then you can go on social media. Like, if you want to hear an update on this project, click on this link and here's a video for you. And there's somebody, either the CEO or a campaign manager, taking 10 minutes out of their day to kind of provide a oral update, which they're probably giving their staff members and their fellow colleagues and stuff like that updates all the time. Easy to speak to. I feel like in an age of information, do you think that this is something that can really propel an organization to offer more value to those supporters?
Yeah, definitely. I think that constant and regular communication is immensely valuable, because then people are not forgetting about you, or it comes back to feeling included in the story. If the executive director of that organization sends out a message, with a video of them talking, like, you feel like, oh wow, they put the time into telling me what's going on. They're putting effort into me. Therefore, I'm more likely to put effort into them, right? Like, again, it's the dialogue and this feeling that, you're part of something bigger, right?
Yeah.
And that you're being rewarded, right? Like, I know it's not about personal reward or personal gain when it comes to nonprofits, but psychologically it is, right? That reward doesn't have to be a physical thing. It doesn't have to be a money thing, but it's that feeling that, yes, I am being acknowledged. My contribution is acknowledged and seen and felt, and I've made a difference. That's what it comes down to. Is you want to feel like you've made a difference. And if an organization can make you feel like that through a little video, or a more regular update on social media, or a cleverly crafted graphic that shows your impact for the year, then that's brilliant. That's going to help those nonprofits stand heads above the ones who aren't doing that.
Yeah. And it's that acknowledgement goes a long way for people who feel that they can't be a part of the process, or it's too far out of reach for them to help on an individual basis, to be able to contribute to a nonprofit organization who has the connections to talk to, members of parliament or Congress or whoever, or has that ability to put a team together of people who went to school for this stuff, from a communication side all the way to the science side to the policy side, to really help, guide this process. A lot of these organizations are in the policy process. They help inform, governments on the policy. They sit on these advisory boards and they do a lot of good. We never hear from that, because it's boring for the most part, but it's like your contribution or the fact that you just put in something on this email or on this social media campaign or whatever that might be, helped us get to this. You're part of the team. It's almost like bringing in everybody, being like, you're part of this nonprofit organization, as an extension. You may not get paid as a staff member, but you're definitely part of this team, because you allow us to do what we need to do. And it's almost like, it's kind of funny. One of the things I laugh about, and I always see this, Barstool Sports is something that I watch on a fairly regular basis. They have a bunch of, have you heard about Barstool?
I heard it on your podcast.
Right. You heard it on that, because I talk a lot about it. Because the topic is all about sports, but it's, they've had a controversial history in a lot of things. So not a lot of people like them for a lot of the stuff they've done in the past. They've cleaned up a lot, but they still are controversial. But one thing that they always do is they always value their listeners. They call them stoolies. And they've had like celebrities that they've hired who have gone, like, who have said, oh, well, these stoolies don't know anything because they'll get flack. It's like, basically it's like a bunch of trash talk, and people will trash talk to some of the talent that's on there. And if you start making fun of that audience, or you start going in hard, like they're not really that important, they're not really necessary, that's it. You're done, because they understand that it's their audience that makes the company. It's the audience that watches all the YouTube videos and listen to all the podcasts and stuff and give them the feedback and the loyalty. And so it's like, if we're not loyal to them, why would they be loyal to us? So if we don't include them and protect them, why would they protect us or go to battle for us, or however, whatever they do. And they've had some pretty significant things happen to them when they lose, like TV shows on ESPN, and the Stoolies came out in their support and they started watching the show on the internet and stuff like that. So it's like, it's almost the same thing. If you take it, obviously not the same kind of controversy, but if you take like a nonprofit organization with their audience, and like, if you start saying, hey, you're part of this team, like we can't do with this, what we do without you, almost like acknowledge it in every piece of content, thank you so much for being part of this team. And then once you start to be like, I am part of this team, like this is, and then you start to say, hey, thank you for helping us get to this point. Here's the next steps. Like, let's work on this. Then it's like, okay, like I'm part of this nonprofit organization. I feel like I'm part of it. I'm loyal. I'm going to talk about it, and you just get that difference. It's that sense of community, which is what I feel like social media and all this marketing is building your own community around it. And I feel as though many of the nonprofits have gotten away from that. Whether you're big or small, I feel like you should still acknowledge, each and every one of your audience as a team member, which I don't do enough, with my audience, and I should do more of that. But it's like, it is a team. I can't do anything if people aren't listening. And so I just feel like that's the mindset shift that people should get back to.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel, well, I'll tell you this as a story because it's more impactful.
Yeah. I love it.
Back when I owned my own business, I was a member of 1% for the Planet.
Right.
And there was one year that it was coming up on time to recertify. And when you recertify with 1%, you need to make sure you've donated the appropriate amount.
Right. Gotcha.
And so I was looking for an organization to donate to that year. And I came across an organization in Vancouver called Sea Smart. And they work with kids and they empower kids to be future ocean heroes. And, with my 2 young kids, it sort of seemed like a great fit for me. So I donated the remainder of what I owed for 1% for the Planet to Sea Smart that year. And before the day was out, I had an email in my inbox from the founder of Sea Smart personally, who wrote to me and said, thank you so much. Where did you hear about this? Can we connect and have a conversation? And she set up a call with me. We chatted, and I've volunteered for her ever since. I now sit on their board, right? And it all came from this one thing. Like, and I didn't even donate that much money, It wasn't something astronomical. It was just purely the fact that she acknowledged and was so appreciative of it. And that now we have this year-long relationship that's not going anywhere because she did that, So it doesn't have to take a lot of effort, I think, is the moral of that story. You don't have to do a lot to build that loyalty and to build that audience, and also understand you're never going to get everyone, right? You have to target, again, this is another thing from the business world, we have to target a specific audience. The way that I shifted from my creative studio targeting everyone to targeting oceans. And that helped me in my career. That's what helps businesses. And the same thing with nonprofits. Like, you don't need everyone. You don't need a $10 donation from everyone. You need to figure out who cares most about what you do, speak to them, and make them become your loyal forever fans. And then you have all that you need, right?
100%. 100%. I mean, that's what it is. I think it comes down to building up that loyalty with those community members and building that community, and just going out of your way. It doesn't take much. I remember I used to give out career advice for people in marine biology, because I struggled when I first got out of school to find a job, and so somebody taught me, and I'm like, well, I have this platform, hey, like let's talk. And so that people would contact me separately from the podcast and just be like, hey, I'm looking to do this. And so what I would do, and it made it easier for me, actually, I would just press record on my camera, and I would just be like, oh, hey, so and so, you asked this question. I thought it'd be easier just to do it this way. I'll send you this video. And the amount of like love I got for that, just being, I can't believe you did a video like personalized to me, on this. And you're just like, well, yeah, like it was, and it actually ended up being, I didn't even think about it from that perspective. But then it started to make me think, I'm like, people value that. Like it takes a little bit of extra work to do it. But for me, it was actually easier, but I just did it because it was easy. But it was like the people who received it were like, this is really cool. Like, thank you so much for that. So sometimes it doesn't take much to make people happy these days, and feeling like they're a part of something is good. So do you think, like, as we wrap up, do you think this is sort of the moral of the story is, you're sending out messages, but your overall goal should be like, make them feel part of the community that you're trying to, one, establish a community, and then make individuals feel a part of the community as much as possible?
Yeah, 100%. That is the goal of communications and good storytelling for oceans, is making, it's acknowledging that you can't do it alone, that you need that community, and that you're inviting people into that story and empowering them to do, to take action on behalf of this thing that we all love, this shared passion we all have for the oceans, right? If we're not operating alone, right? That's something very interesting about the ocean industry. Super collaborative. We're all into helping each other because we're all fighting for the same thing, which is a big thing to be fighting for. So yes, opening that door, opening yourself up, it doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to take a lot of effort, but it's thinking about it from the perspective of your audience, stepping outside of the organization's perspective, flipping it around, thinking about what you do from your audience perspective, how you can get them more involved. That little flip in thinking can make a world of difference. So again, going back to that example of go to your website and see how many times you've written we. Flip it around and change all those we's to you's and see what happens,
Yeah, that's a huge thing. Even just like a small little detail like that, where you don't even realize it, and you start to say, this is what you can do. This is, being part of the community is this. That's amazing. Natalie, this has been awesome. I don't think, we're going to end it on this episode, but I'd love to have you back on to talk more communications about you. Cause I know I get excited about this kind of stuff. But I think a lot of people feel the same way in terms of a lot of the emails that they receive or any type of communication that they receive from, nonprofits is, especially if you donate once, it's like feels like it's just return. You don't feel part of that community. You just feel like you're just a bank to some of them. And some people, especially these days in the financial situation that we're all in, it's difficult to donate. So you feel that little guilty. It's like, I don't think I can donate at this point. I'm trying to just buy food or live, so it becomes a little more difficult, but feeling part of that team, you can really get a more loyal community and more loyal fan base. So as super fans, I think, as they call it. So that's always great. But now this has been absolutely amazing. If people want to get a hold of you, how could they do so?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn under Natalie Gilson, or that's probably the best way. You can figure out everything from there.
Yeah. Well, I'll put the link in the show notes if you're okay with that, and then so people can get a hold and they can connect. But this has been absolutely wonderful. Love to have you back, Natalie, and thank you so much.
Thank you as well.
Thank you, Natalie, for joining us on this episode of How to Protect the Ocean. It was wonderful to be able to speak to someone else about communications and hear ideas. I mean, we've had conversations before where we just kind of riff off of ideas of how communication can be better, what communication is out there, how, conservation and ocean conservation communication can get better. Wow, that's a mouthful for me to say. I'm surprised I said it properly the first time. But it's something that is necessary. It's why I got into podcasting. I find communication is one of the best ways to get your message out there, and just to make sure that people understand not only what's happening with the ocean, but the solutions around what's happening with the ocean and how we can implement them, whether they be from an individual level all the way to a government level, and sort of the priorities we need to put on each of those levels. it's just the way we need to do things. And a lot of organizations will put work into and just a ton of work and money into the researching and the projects that they put together, but not necessarily in the communications that they give to the community, which helps support a lot of the work that they put together. And I feel like going through, and just as Natalie said, going through with that team and that community and that loyalty aspect can really help change a message to, instead of saying, this is what we've done, this is what we've done, this is what this organization has been able to do, and this is with the help of you, is, hey, you're part of this team. You are able to accomplish this just with us. This is what you are able to do with your support. Thank you for that. We appreciate that. Having that semi-personalized message in a video or an audio form, just being like, we appreciate the work that you've been able to put in. We acknowledge that you've been able to help. It's not easy, and we thank you for that. Instead of just like a generic email saying thank you, it's like a video saying, hey, thanks. I'm the campaign manager for the plastics, or for the fisheries campaign, or for whatever campaign. This money that you've provided, you may think it's small, but it actually helps us a lot. It helps us dedicate more time. And this is where we're at in the project. This is where we're at in the campaign. And this is how you're helping. I think it goes such a far way. I've seen it happen. You heard me talk about it in the interview. And it's something that I think can go such a long way with supporters in being, hey, I really like this organization. They actually take the time out to say, thank you. Really appreciate that. That's all that's needed sometimes, just information that's needed. And I just love it. So if you want to get a hold of Natalie, you can do so. I want to thank again, Natalie, for coming on the show. She'll be on again. We'll have more conversations of this. I do believe that quite a bit, because we love to talk about communications. But she'll be on the podcast again. Her LinkedIn is in the show notes. You can just click on that link and you can connect with her. And then, of course, the website link for Pisces project management will also be on the show notes, in the show notes. So you can just click on that link to get more information on there. And that's it for today's episode. If you want to get a hold of me, you can DM me on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. I would love to hear how you think how you feel when you get an email or you get some kind of connection or communication from your favorite nonprofit organization. Do you feel good about it? Do you feel like you're just kind of out of the picture? Do you feel part of a community? I would love to hear what makes you think that and what makes you think differently and what you think their solution should be. Hit me up on Instagram at How to Protect the Ocean. I want to thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.